This is VSiN, the sports betting network. This is Money Moves on VSiN, the sports betting network. What's up, folks? Welcome in. Another wonderful edition of Money Moves. Jonathan Von Tobel flying solo for today. Don't worry, Storm Tony will be around a little bit later. I believe she's out in Dallas as she will be working the rink, sideline, whatever we want to call it, whatever terminology we want to use for the game tonight between Dallas and Minnesota. We'll have plenty on that with her and throughout the program as to get you set for the postseason on both the ice and the hardwood. So, without further ado, let's get the show started as we always do.
It's time for the top headlines and topics of the day. This is The Rundown.
First and foremost, it is draft week. We will get our hands on the NFL draft all throughout the week leading up to the first round. Tim Murray's going to join us in this hour. We'll get his thoughts on some draft news, notes, and some best bets as we get closer to the first round of the NFL draft. We should also note, of course, the unique rule that we have out here in Nevada where everything's going to get pulled down 24 hours before the draft. Those of you who are not, though, out in this state have plenty of time to get down on some of these draft props as the markets develop and as more news comes down. We also had a blockbuster trade over the weekend that affects the order of the draft. We'll talk about that with Tim and how we're going to handle it from a betting perspective coming up in about 30 minutes from now. Also, ice time, folks. Into the NHL postseason. It was a fun weekend, a ridiculous finish for the Buffalo Sabres. We'll have plenty of analysis on the games tonight. Looking forward to one team in particular today to continue their dominance and another team that maybe got away with some stuff in the victory. We'll tell you who those teams are, what we're looking at, and, of course, Storm Tony will join us to get her thoughts on her series and the rest that will be playing out throughout the course of the week today and tomorrow. But we begin with the NBA, the association over the weekend. Home dominance, the story in the NBA playoffs. Yes, a lot of people, as usual, want to whine and moan and complain. First round's been a snooze fest. Yesterday was kind of boring for the most part. Had some good games sprinkled in over the weekend, mostly on Saturday. But there's a lot to get to with the theme of the week in the NBA, and I think there's two ways you look at it. The first of which could be, hey, these favorites have been dominating in the postseason up to this point, and this point being only 4 games so far. But first-round favorites, 5-2 straight up, 5-2 against the spread. We also saw unders have a commanding lead there in the first-round series, 6-1 to the under through the first 7 games. And last night as well. Did not include and update my notes with the San Antonio Spurs winning and covering in that matchup against the Portland Trail Blazers. So 6-2 straight up and against the spread for the 8 games we saw over the weekend in the NBA postseason. Unders with the edge still there, of course, with the result from last night. But I think there's another way to look at what we have seen in the NBA up to this point, outside of just the complaining about it. It's, all right, so what do we do with this? Outside of the favorites, if you actually divvy it up by home teams, that's where it really sticks out from what we saw on both Saturday and Sunday. Home teams, 7-1 straight up and against the spread over the weekend in the NBA playoffs. And why it matters is I brought this up in passing in the week leading up to the NBA playoffs and going into the play-in. We talked about this a little bit, how you want to change home court when it comes to what it's worth as we head into the postseason. And we have a growing amount of evidence, and we'll go from when they allowed people back in. COVID seems like a lifetime ago, but we've had a few seasons now since people were allowed back in these arenas to watch these games. If you go back to last season, 2025, home teams had an average net rating in the playoffs of +6. That is a very big change from the average home net rating in the regular season of +1.7. If you go back to 2024, home teams in the postseason, on average, outscored their opponents by 5.1 points every 100 possessions. In that regular season, it was 2.3. In 2023, the home teams outscored their opponents in the postseason by 4.3 points. In that regular season, it was 2.7. And in 2022, home teams in the postseason outscored their opponents by 4.7 points every 100 possessions. In that regular season, it was only 1.9. Over the weekend, in the 8 games that we saw in the playoffs, the average home net rating was plus 11.5. That is a far cry, of course, from the regular season that we just watched, in which home teams just on average outscored their opponents by 2 points every 100 possessions. So is home court worth 11 points? No, not at all. We're only talking about 8 games so far. But I think what matters here is that these teams, for whatever reason, home court does matter more for them once the postseason begins, even right away when you're talking about this. I can understand maybe over the course of a larger sample size, but right now we have a lot of evidence backed by the last few years that this is going to be one where if you're someone that makes your own numbers, if you're talking about looking at these teams at home, you really do have to start to factor in a much stronger home court. Outside of the Detroit Pistons, every team held serve at home, and they held serve to a pretty solid margin, and that is going to matter when you're talking about rating home court as we move on into the postseason. Again, since 2022, we'll break it down like this. Average net rating at home has at the very least been plus 4.3 in non-garbage time. That is a very strong increase in home court advantage that we have seen up to this point. Also, since we're entering game twos, the zigzag becomes a very vogue thing to potentially start to lean on here. From Steve Makinen in the newsletter today, you can go to VSiN.com, you can check it out. The game two angles over the last 9 seasons. First round game two hosts, 57-15 straight up. 48-24 against the spread. That's a 66.7% cover rate. Game one winners at home, 33-18 ATS since 2016, though just 2-4, as Makinen notes, last spring. So let's get to tonight. We got 3 games on the card in the NBA. Toronto Raptors at the Cleveland Cavaliers tip us off for the day. Cavs open up as an 8.5-point favorite when game 2 gets hung. A total of 224.5. The real question here, and the thing that we're going to have to monitor, of course, is the status of Emmanuel Quickley for the Toronto Raptors. We'll get into the details of this, but Quickley getting ruled out really did hurt this Toronto Raptors offense, and it does explain what we saw in the game 1 in terms of line movement. We saw game 1 open 7.5, eventually closed Cleveland as a 9.5-point favorite. Total went from 219.5 to 217.5. Cleveland covers as a 9.5-point favorite. Game goes over the total. Darko Rakovic said on Sunday about Emmanuel Quickley, quote, he's in practice now. We're going to see how much he can do today, and we'll go from there. Sounds like a very, very true questionable for Quickley at this point, and we will see if he will be able to make it as a game-time decision. But his status is going to greatly affect whether or not this Toronto offense is going to get back on track here. 117.2 offensive rating in game 1 of non-garbage time, despite going a combined 27 of 44. That's 61% both at the rim and from beyond the arc. Quickley was really needed in this game against Cleveland. They had 17 turnovers. It's a turnover rate of 18.3%. And the other thing is, Justin, you can tell me in my ear if we have this or not, but Brandon Ingram, we do know that he has to have a bigger game. 17 points on 5 of 9 shooting in game 1, but took just 1 shot attempt in the second half. Here was Ingram after the game talking about his role in the second half and what changed from a game plan standpoint.
Well, Coach wanted to use me as a screener. Also, he noticed that my man wasn't coming off of me, so he wanted me outside of the action a little bit and being a receiver. But, you know, at the end of the day, me shooting 9 shots is not going to win a basketball game. So just got to figure out ways where I can still be effective while they're doing whatever defense.
Rakovic can get a lot of blame for that, but Ingram can also be a little bit more aggressive. But it's a surprising call to take Brandon Ingram out of some of those actions, considering he was really good in that first half, was making a ton of really tough jump shots. So you wonder from a player prop standpoint if maybe some of the adjustments that Toronto has in their arsenal, if Quickley does not end up playing, is going to be a high shot volume for Brandon Ingram in this game, only because of what happened in that second half when Cleveland ended up pulling away. But you do have to feel somewhat troubled if you're Toronto as you move forward in this series. There is a game in which you shot as well as you did from beyond the arc and at the rim. You had some offensive success, and yet still turned the ball over 17 times. Didn't cover the number. And now you've got to try to do that again here in game 2. And one would assume that you're not going to be able to replicate the offensive success, especially from beyond the arc, given what your larger sample size of data in the regular season told us. So that is going to be a really big problem for this group. You've also got to play better defensively. We talked about this in our series preview of this set, which was who in the world are you using defensively for both James Harden and Donovan Mitchell? And it was very clear that Toronto did not have an option for either of them defensively. Harden in game 1, 22 points, 10 assists on 8 of 18 shooting. He went 4 of 7 from beyond the arc. Donovan Mitchell, though, was the big guy. 32 points, 4 assists, 11 of 20 from the floor, and also a 4 of 7 shooting mark from deep. That is going to be something that Toronto has to figure out. So with that in mind, what's the play here? I think the total is where you look for this game. So again, going back to game 1, total opened up 219.5. Gets cut down to 217.5 on the heels of the Quickley news as well. Here, you get the opener of 224.5 at some spots. That is quite the adjustment from where we closed for game 1. And then look at some of the indicators that you have here. First game was not particularly fast in the series. 98.5 in terms of pace, so about 98 possessions for both of these teams. So not a very fast up and down game. ungodly efficiency for both teams in certain areas. Raptors, as we talked about, 27 of 44, both at the rim and from beyond the arc. Cavaliers as a team go 16 of 32 from deep. We talked about both Mitchell and Harden. Max Strus also contributed to this as well. He ended up going 4 of 6. And you had 63 bleeping free throw attempts between the two teams as well. So if this thing is officiated differently in the sense of they allow a little bit more to go, they're allowed to be a little bit more physical. If the shooting regresses for both teams from beyond the arc, if you have the exact same in terms of pace and tempo that you're going to get from both of these teams, you have a game that closed 217.5 for game one, or a series, excuse me, and then a game two opener of 224. I got under 223.5, but I do think under 222.5 still playable as well. I think that merits a play on the under, and that's kind of the strategy for me at least. We've talked about this at the beginning of the series. Don't really like to kind of get involved for game ones, just see how they play out, and then play adjustments from there. Playing an adjusted total like this, given what some of the indicators were, I would say it's worth looking at playing under the total here. So we have 2 other games left on the card. We're going to get the full details on these coming up a little bit later, but worth at the very least setting the table for these contests. Hawks at Knicks. Knicks open up a 6.5-point favorite with a total of 215.5 once game one is all set and done. Knicks, of course, taking a 1-0 series lead on Saturday. Knicks right now a 6-point favorite with a total of 218.5. And then game two between Minnesota and Denver. Denver opens up as a 6.5-point favorite, total of 230.5. Current numbers at this one, 7 in favor of Denver with a total of 232. So a slight adjustment from where we were at close for game one. Story here is going to be Anthony Edwards and whether or not he is going to be fully healthy. He did participate in shoot-around today. That is despite the fact that, of course, he is holding a questionable tag. Knee is the issue here. Should also note that the Atlanta Hawks, Onyeka Okongwu, he's been playing through a questionable tag. He's officially holding that again, but he also participated in shoot-around today. We'll have more details on those games, some deep dives. We'll hear from Anthony Edwards as well. But if you got a group chat full of hot takes, Cut built for you. Cut, a social betting platform that lets you bet directly against your friends and other users on basically anything: sports, politics, pop culture, and even personal bets. Now you can get 20% deposit bonus on your first deposit when you use promo code VSiN. Head to cut.com, KUTT.com. Download in the App Store. Promo code is VSiN. So you're listening to this podcast because you want an edge. But what if I told you you're only halfway there? You've got the mindset. Now it's time to get the toolkit to match. Here's the thing. Pro bettors spend thousands on data and tools, but what they don't want you to know is that you can get the same edge for a fraction of the cost with VSiN Pro. VSiN Pro gives you access to expert picks, public betting data, prop projections, powerful tools, analytics, and more. Just tap the link in the description and see why thousands of bettors are already using VSiN Pro to cash more bets.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the sports betting network.
We'll get back to the association previews for tonight. 2 other games to get into. Some very good ones as well. Very much looking forward to Minnesota and Denver. That was a fun game. About a 2-point game halfway through the fourth quarter before the Nuggets pulled away. Can they do it again against maybe an unhealthy Timberwolves team? We'll discuss coming up in about 30 minutes from now. But let's head to the NFL draft. It is draft week. Everybody is very excited about what's going to happen a little bit later this week. And to break it all down, one of the best ones at the network to get it all done, and host of the College Football Betting Podcast as well as VSiN Primetime, my old cohort on a daily basis, Tim Murray. Nice enough to give us some time on the progressive guest line. Tim, it's good to talk to you, buddy. Draft is quickly approaching. I know you've got some angles you want to hit, but I have to hit the headline, of course. You know where I'm always at here. You texted us during the week in the middle of the show, and I got so excited when the move started on the under 1.5 quarterbacks in the first round. So walk us through where you stand right now, because the fervor, the fire around Ty Simpson being a first-round pick just will not die, it would seem.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a roller coaster ride, because humans a couple weeks ago loved over 1.5 and laid a decent price on it. And then it came down when you and I texted about it. Now it's moved back towards the over. You know, I found it interesting. Albert Breer earlier today was on, I think, the Dan Patrick show, and was asked, would it be over or under 1.5? And he said under. Now it's just one reporter out there. He wasn't saying with overwhelming conviction. We had Tony Pauline, a guy that I highly respect, and he said he believed it was 90% that Ty Simpson goes in the first round. So I think For me, JVT, and I get it, a lot of people listening in right now don't live in Nevada and don't have, Stations Casino at their beck and call. But I played over 29.5 on Ty Simpson because, is there a chance that the Cardinals or the Jets sitting there at 33 and 34 could jump back into the first round to get Ty Simpson? I certainly think it's possible. And I think the question you have to ask is what's the drop-off from Simpson to everybody else? I know the buzzword that you always joke about is fifth-year option, and that's always brought up as well. I don't have I'm not saying you should play under 1.5, but I would today probably play under rather than over. I just am not fully buying the Ty Simpson love because I don't know who outside of Arizona is racing to go get him, right? And Arizona's not going to pick him at 3. The Jets aren't going to use 2 or 13 on him. So it's about trading back in. And I think that's the question you have when you're betting this, is you're betting on a trade happening in order for him to go in the first round, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know, Tim. The Saints might be screwed. Tyler Shuck doesn't have a fifth-year option. What are they going to do? It's all over. There's no way that they can keep him and or re-sign him or do any of those things with him. Tim Murray with us. As you can hear the sarcasm in my voice, of course, talking about the NFL draft. All right, let's hit a couple of things that are on your mind, and then I got some other things I want to hit you with. Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker, he is, of course, very popular out of Texas Tech, made a big name for himself at the end of the college football season. What is our expectation for him, and how are we going to bet where he goes, where he ends up?
Yeah, and I'm kind of at the point, JVT, where I'm looking for maybe a little bit of some longer shots right now. A lot of the markets are going crazy. I mean, the movement on Jeremiah Love under 5.5 was massive today with reports coming out that maybe he could go as high as number 3. So Jacob Rodriguez was mentioned in both Todd McShay's column today and also Tony Pauline saying, hey, don't be surprised if kind of ... So I went and looked up the odds of what it is for him to go in the first round. And at BetMGM, he's 5-1. A couple other places, he's like plus 375. So I took, a quarter of a unit play and took a little bit of a long shot on Jacob Rodriguez. He checks a lot of boxes. He was an All-American. He was kind of the captain of the defense there at Texas Tech, kind of did everything right. So I think back end of the first round, if you're looking at a team that's just looking for a plug-and-play starter, it feels like Jacob Rodriguez could be one of those guys. So, 5-1 at BetMGM I thought was worth a little play today, and I took a shot at that for him to be a first-round pick.
What's the latest on your guy Jeremiah Love and where he's going to go?
Yeah, so today's been busy for him, man. So when you look at Jeremiah Love in the market, his over-under was 4.5 when it opened, and then it moved to 5.5 with kind of thoughts that he would either go to Tennessee or, or fall a little bit. And then today we're getting reports from Schefter, and I don't know if it's Monday morning of the draft week. Hey, we might take Jeremiah Love, or you guys should come up and get him, right? It could be a situation where the Cardinals are kind of toying around with people, but there's a belief that he could go 3, he could go 4, and maybe, I don't believe it, but maybe he could go 5. I have not touched anything with Jeremiah Love. The odds for him to go number 3 have shrunk a little bit today. With Reese seeming like he's going to the Jets, that kind of opens up the possibility of could Love go number 3 to the Cardinals. I'll believe it when I see it, and maybe it's a play against Tennessee, right? So, Love's kind of interesting one. The other one that felt like got a lot of buzz today, JVT, was Sonny Styles. And it sounds like Sonny Styles, his over-under's 5.5, which I think is appropriately, priced. And I've debated whether or not to play minus 110 on the under because I think I see an out at 4, and I think I see an out at 5. So when you're playing under 5.5, obviously you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room, right? But it does feel like Sonny Styles is a guy that's getting a lot of buzz right now that could be gone by pick 6.
Tim Murray with us again, host of VSiN Primetime College Football Betting Podcast as well. Joining us on the Progressive Guest Line. Let's talk about another thing you got in your pocket. Second defensive back on the board. How are you going to handle this?
Yeah, so I haven't bet it yet, but I think I'm going to. So the news today was that McCoy, the projected second defensive back selected, has got some injury concerns. So I've been looking at, Colton Hood is plus 450 and Chris Johnson is plus 275. Chris Johnson's a guy that I do have a little bet on him to be in a first-round pick. He's kind of been mocked in like that 28 to 32 range. Has been getting a lot of hype. He's a DB out of San Diego State. But, people have brought up that McCoy could be like Will Johnson a year ago, who took a massive fall, I think until mid-second round last year. He was the DB out of Michigan. So once again, similar to the Jacob Rodriguez play, this is more of a smaller play, but wouldn't be surprised if these injury concerns that multiple insiders have brought up. I think Breer brought it up in his column today. I think Miche mentioned it in his column today. So I was looking at either Johnson or Hood, or maybe splitting a unit and maybe putting a little bit on each of them. So the second defensive back or second cornerback selected, because obviously Caleb Downs is also a defensive back. So second cornerback selected, that's a market at DraftKings. I think Johnson or Hood could be a look there if you're looking for a little bit more of a longer shot here the week of the draft.
All right, let's talk about some of these pass catchers really quickly. First and foremost, Carnell Tate, 7.5 over -125. Am I right in that there's some growing debate whether it's him or Tyson? I thought it was Tate that was going to be the first guy off the board.
Yeah, it feels like this workout that Jordan Tyson had over the weekend kind of cleared some things up. I took a long shot, I think it was on Thursday, on Tyson to go number 5 at 19-1. I don't think he will, but from all reports, with this trade of Dexter Lawrence, it sounds like the Giants want Downs or Styles and then Tyson as in some particular order. So we haven't heard a ton about Tate. He remains the favorite to be the first wide receiver selected. I was hoping for a bigger number, but it does feel like the week of the draft, doesn't it feel like the Jordan Tyson hype seems to be growing a little bit? So I would not be surprised from everything we've read that Jordan Tyson could potentially go ahead of Carnell Tate, but it also could be a situation where Tate is just, he's been locked in at the number 1. I think Washington at 7 could be interested in Carnell Tate. Cleveland, I don't really know what Cleveland is going to do. I think they're a possible trade candidate to get trade out, maybe with the Cowboys. I know that's been kind of floated out there as well. So, but I do feel like I'm buying the Tyson hype. It does feel like he, with his medical check and his new workout this weekend, I feel like Jordan Tyson has a chance to be the first wide receiver selected, which is interesting when you think about Mekhi Lemon. I don't really know what to do with Mekhi Lemon. Yeah. And I took a little bit of a flyer, JVT, in a matchup. I took Sadiq to go ahead of Mekhi Lemon. I think it's plus 150. I'm not in love with it, but I think Sadiq, because he's just such a unique athlete, the tight end of Oregon, I think someone could take a shot on him because there does feel like there's a bit of a gap from him to the next group of tight ends.
All right, last 45 seconds. What does the acquisition of the 10th overall pick do for you for the Giants? Where could they go?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think Harbaugh really wants Downs or Styles, and my gut tells me he's going to go Styles at 5, which is why today in town at Stations, I played a little bit on Caleb Downs over 9.5 plus 135. I think Caleb Downs is awesome, but it doesn't matter what we think, right? It's about where he could go. A lot of projections have him 10, 11. So I think it could be Styles 5 and then 10 for the Giants. So I think with the trade, in my opinion, it led me to take a little bit of a bet on Downs to go over 9.5 at plus 135 at Stations.
Tim, appreciate it, buddy. Thank you very much.
All right, JVT. See you, dude.
Got it. Again, VSiN Primetime College Football Betting Podcast as well. Tim all over the NFL Draft. The boys will be all over it throughout the week, too. When we come back, we get back to the association. Ryan Hollins is going to join us, former NBA pro analyst for the Rockets. We'll get the down low on what's going on with Kevin Durant.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
One of the big stunners of the weekend, not only the late scratch on one Kevin Durant due to a knee injury suffered in practice earlier in the week, but the ensuing result of the Lakers taking a 1-0 series lead over the Houston Rockets, 107-98. To break that down a little bit more, Ryan Hollins now joins us here on the Progressive Guest Line. Of course, analyst for the Houston Rockets, NBA pro as well. Ryan, always appreciate a couple of minutes. So let's just start with the big news, the elephant in the room, Kevin Durant, the knee injury. What exactly happened in practice, and what do you expect here for Game 2? What's his status like, and how is he feeling?
I don't know exactly what happened in practice. I wasn't there, but everything that we've heard is that he bumped knees with somebody. That's a normal basketball injury. We're hoping that it's just a contusion, no type of damage to any ligaments. Again, I'm no medical expert, but a bruise would be the best case scenario. Now you're just waiting for it to the swelling or whatever is there to come down. Ultimately, every sign points to him playing in game 2. We saw him warming up in game 1. There was a bit of a limp when he walked, but it was a great sign that he was able to go out there and shoot ultimately. So again, not a make or break scenario. If you need to rest him more, you rest him more and kind of allow the group to play without him in game 2. But hopefully he gets out there and the Houston Rockets get a win and you swing the series right back in Houston's favor. And all they have to do right now is just win one of these 2 games ultimately, and that's a win.
So you played a lot of basketball in your lifetime. Game 1, you go back to it, and I tell you, hey, the Rockets are going to take 27 more shot attempts to grab 18 more offensive rebounds. You're probably feeling relatively good about that game. What exactly happened that they had those advantages and yet couldn't get it done?
Well, a lot of those offensive rebounds came at the end of the game. The Lakers were masterful at playing at their own pace. When your best player is 41 years old, you want to execute in the half court, take your time. There are too many dribbles. When guys got in bad spots, I thought Luke Kennard was able to just kind of run around free. Nobody put their hands on him. LeBron James just walked his way to the rim. There was no help. And, again, he was extremely comfortable. So I think the big adjustments from the Houston Rockets standpoint is looking for more aggression towards LeBron, more urgency with Kennard once he's on the three-point line, and then ultimately picking up the pace and using their youth and their athleticism to their advantage, and also exposing those double teams. J.J. Redick was masterful. It was really a soft double that he sent at Şengün. So it was really non-committal, but just using their length in the lane, having high hands, playing without fouling, it really bothered the Houston Rockets.
You know, it seemed like, and this is from the novice's eye watching on his couch on TV, but it didn't seem like Amen Thompson matched up defensively a lot with LeBron James. Is that something that you saw? Do you expect more of that Thompson on LeBron as we get into game 2? Ooh, I don't think we have him. All right, maybe we'll see if we can get him back. All right, let me know, Justin, if we can get him back here as we look at it. Because that was one of the big things that I thought was pretty interesting from a matchup standpoint, is whether or not Thompson was going to take on that advantage, or whether it was going to be Okogie defensively matching up with LeBron James there. James in the game, as we were talking about, too. 19 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists, 9 of 15 from the floor, plus 11 for the night as well. A really good performance from LeBron when you looked at the way the Lakers were playing there and overcoming a lot of what we talked about here. When you looked at the half-court advantages that they had, the offensive rebounding, and yet still what really kind of killed Houston in that game, which maybe we can hit with Ryan if we get him back, is whether or not that half-court offense is going to be a little bit more efficient with another crack at the Los Angeles Lakers, and obviously really dependent on whether or not Kevin Durant's going to be there. All right, we got Ryan back. Ryan, I wanted to start with, we'll go back to the question I asked you. Amen Thompson is a primary defender for LeBron. It didn't seem like we saw a lot of it, but maybe you saw it differently, and if it is, are we going to see more of that here in Game 2? Okay, maybe we don't have him. Or can I not hear him? Okay. I don't. So, all right, let's see if we can reset with him. Either way, that is going to be something that is worth asking here if we can get him back. But regardless of this, as we move forward to Game 2, worth pointing out here is that you're going to have to sit on the sidelines until whether or not we can find out what Durant's status is going to be. Some of the quotes were somewhat worrisome, too, about Durant and what's going to happen with his knee. I know the initial prognosis is it's not going to be a multi-game thing, but we will be waiting with bated breath to see whether or not he's going to be available. Numbers here for Game 2 of the set between these two teams coming up on Tuesday. Lakers, 4.5-point dog, total down to 206.5. Really low scoring game between the two of them in Game 1, and we'll see if that resets here in Game 2. The other thing that I think is definitely worth pointing out for this series as we're going to watch it is, of course, going to be Reed Sheppard. One of the big ones is going to be whether or not he can match from a three-point shooting standpoint, or at least provide from that standpoint what he's got. Third time's a charm. Let's start. Ryan, let's try this. What'd you see from Reed Sheppard over the weekend?
I thought the best thing is that he was aggressive. He wasn't shy in those moments. You got to be better defensively. You know, he can't be a liability. He's going to have to make a stand and not allow guys to get downhill on him. But I think he had, 4 or 5 threes in the game. So that's his job. And now if you pair him alongside Kevin Durant and Kevin's getting double teamed, you know, the goal is for him to be an outlet. And now you really are challenged. You try to help off of Kevin and you double team. So I thought he was really good, and what he brings to the table is spacing, and that's something that the Houston Rockets really need.
What about Amen Thompson? The question I was trying to ask you was, what do you see from him defensively? Do we see more of him on LeBron? And offensively, a 7 of 18 night, but he had the best plus-minus of all these Rockets. It seemed like he was providing, even though statistically he wasn't as efficient on offense.
Yeah, I think Houston's got an array of defenders that they can throw at LeBron. And now Amen Thompson's more important on the offensive side of the ball. So, you may want to go rest his legs. I think he leads the team in minutes, but offensively, when Kevin gets back, I think he can get more to a natural role playing underneath. You can space the floor with Kevin and Reed. Alpe's in the short roll. And now the Houston Rockets spacing ends up being much, much better. And I don't know why everybody's hung up on numbers. He was by far the Rockets' best player in that game. He kept a lot of plays alive. He was aggressive getting downhill. He was the only one really able to consistently generate offense through the entirety of the game. So I thought Amen Thompson was wonderful. I thought he did what he could do.
For this bench for Houston, we're talking with Ryan Hollins here, former NBA player, analyst for the Houston Rockets, looking at their series against the Los Angeles Lakers. What do you think Ime Udoka's trust level is like for some of the guys that didn't get in this game, and how deep do you think he'd be willing to go? There's I think is the Pat Riley thing, like you play 8 and you trust 7. How deep do you think he's willing to go with this bench, and we maybe see more minutes from guys that we didn't see in Game 1?
Man, that's a great question. It's definitely a long series at hand. This isn't a Game 7 type mentality, but I would assume Ime throws everything out there trying to get it. And he's got guys that, when he's put his back is against the wall, Aaron Holiday is one of those guys that he trusts. Could be a Jayshawn Tate. He may stick with, the main starters that he has. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he's got a couple guys that maybe you didn't see a lot of minutes from that, but could end up playing a lot. And remember, I said Aaron Holiday in particular has been one of those guys because he's a really good defender. He's tough as nails, and he can really space the floor and knock down shots if Reed's not in the ball game. And sometimes he's gotten the nod over the Reed just by having veteran experience.
How do you, as a player, how did you like getting coached? Because the reason why I ask is, I'm sure you can find out is, Udoka's got a pretty unique way of handling things, both when he talks to the media and it seems like his interactions on the sideline. A hard-nosed guy, I think, is a good way to call it. Do you think this team responds to the way that Udoka is, a little bit more hard-nosed, asking these guys in a really aggressive way to get their job done? How did you respond to coaching like that?
Oh, I'd have loved to coach like Ime Udoka because he's going to hold the best player accountable just the way that he's going to hold the worst player. Not that anybody's the worst player, but maybe more of the role players accountable. And the one thing Ime does that you don't see, like before a guy goes in the game, he puts his arm around those guys. If he's frustrated by a call or something's going on, he's out there fighting for the guys. He doesn't mind getting it technical. So as a player, you're going, man, coach is fighting for me. I got to do my job even more. And these guys love playing for Coach Ime Udoka. He's pushed Alperen Sengun to being an all-star in the NBA. Make no mistake about that. So he was very instrumental to my understanding of Kevin Durant being willing to come and play for the Houston Rockets because he knew Ime. He knew what Ime was. So ultimately, man, Ime's an unbelievable coach. And I can't stand this criticism of Ime. Like when you're on a roster and you lose your veteran point guard, it takes a long time to implement the things that you want to put into the game. That's the nice thing about a point guard. And I think everybody's just acts like Fred VanVleet has no value. No, you're seeing Fred VanVleet's value. And it's not that the Rockets don't have plays or don't go over film or don't have things that they love to see. It just takes a lot longer when you don't have a true veteran point guard on the floor. So there's no knock to any of the other guys that are trying to grow in those spaces. But I think just the knocks on him are absolutely ridiculous. And again, that's just part of the NBA, man. Everybody feels like there has to be someone to blame. And if they had watched the games all year long or understood or had a true respect for Fred VanVleet, I think those conversations would be a lot different.
Ryan, we're up against it, but I appreciate a couple minutes. Thanks for sticking through the technical difficulties. Enjoy the series, man. Have a good call.
Anytime, brother.
Yep, got it. At the Ryan Hollins up on X, former NBA player, former Clipper, by the way, most importantly, and up there on Rockets TV. Folks, reminder, our spring special is up. NHL NBA playoffs, of course, underway. One of the best stretches of the sports betting calendar, one of my favorites as well. And if you're betting, have the right information. It makes all the difference. Sign up for our spring special. You get full access through August 1st for a one-time payment of just $59. Takes you through the NBA and NHL Finals, World Cup, Kentucky Derby, U.S. Open, Wimbledon, and more. Sign up today. Instant access to the daily best bets, real-time betting splits from DraftKings, Circa, AI-powered prop tools, and more. $59, 50% off the regular monthly price. Visit vsin.com/subscribe. That's VSIN.com/subscribe.
You're watching Money Moves here on VSIN, the sports betting network.
Big thanks, Ryan Hollins, who was with us a little bit earlier, former NBA pro. I'm laughing because we do have a little bit of a controversy that has emerged, and it's not going to matter. Nothing is going to change. But in the association, we actually told you this might happen. It didn't happen the way we wanted it to, or at least maybe. We'll see if maybe somebody comes out and confirms this. But Bill Simmons, did you see this yesterday on his podcast last night, admitted that he switched his sixth man of the year vote after watching the play-in. So for those who don't remember or know, the voters got their ballots after the play-in because of the 65-game rule. You had multiple players that were appealing grievances to see if they could, because of hardship, whatever the term they have, could get a game or two removed so that they can then qualify for the awards. Famously, Luka Doncic and Cade Cunningham both qualified after their hearings were approved or whatever. The quote from Bill Simmons, quote, "The play-in did change my sixth man of the year vote. I had Jaquez over Keldon Johnson, but then Miami lost on Wednesday, and I was like, I'm going to have the sixth man of the year on a team that couldn't get to the last round of the play-in. I switched it. That's the league's fault. They should have made us vote before the play-in game." That's absolutely a ridiculous statement. Nothing will happen, of course. Bill Simmons will not lose his vote. He will continue to be able to decide this. But we bet money on these things, and this is exactly what we're talking about here. The human element, the fact that sometimes, like many, many years ago, I'll have to look it up. Justin, could you look it up for me? Somebody left Anthony Davis off a all-defensive team ballot, and I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Maria Taylor, but maybe we could confirm that. So you get something like that, or you get a voter outwardly saying, yeah, I know I'm supposed to only vote because of a regular season, but I watched a postseason game and I decided to change my ballot anyway, and it's not my fault that I can't have the mental fortitude to just leave that out of my mind, and instead I'm going to change my mind to do it. And I'm willing to bet that Bill Simmons is not the only one who has actually done that, and I'm actually willing to bet that Bill Simmons is just the only one that is willing to put his name behind it. But either way, absolutely ridiculous that we get somebody to come out and say it. So it was Maria Taylor that left Anthony Davis off. Yeah, that was a few years ago as well. So with that, let's get into the actual playoffs, because remember, the play-ins are existent in a black hole and a void. If you try to find the statistics for them, they do not exist. Let's talk a little Minnesota and Denver. We'll get to Knicks and Hawks as well, but worth talking about this one because this seems like the most intriguing series, especially because of Anthony Edwards. Now, Edwards did play in game one of this set, as we all watched. It was an entertaining game, 2-point game in the fourth quarter. Denver ends up pulling away late in that contest as well. Ultimately gets a 1-0 series victory, or excuse me, has a 1-0 series lead. And now 7.5-point favorites with a total of 230.5, the current numbers out there. Edwards in the first game, though, and really as we move forward, is going to be the focus of what this is, because he's been dealing with this knee injury. That is the same knee injury that kept Steph Curry out for a much larger run. And he was not particularly great in the game. Ended up with 22 points, 7 of 19 from the floor, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, but also didn't look as effective defensively. And on the other end, Jamal Murray, one who Anthony Edwards drew on defense, had a pretty good game from a scoring standpoint, 30 points, but specifically 16 of his points came at the free throw line. Here was Edwards after game one talking about the chasing Jamal Murray around.
It's really tiring chasing him around. He's in like every action. If the first DHO don't work, it's another DHO coming, and it's a pin down coming for him. So yeah, they got a lot of tricks up their sleeve when it comes to getting him the ball, getting him off of people who pressure him, like not letting him bring the ball up the court. So they got a good scheme for him, but we got a couple of different guys we can throw at him, but he did a good job tonight. He played well.
It was an interesting game because Murray, it's kind of a microcosm, his performance of what the game was overall. Neither team was overtly efficient from the floor. The Nuggets shot 44% from the floor, 28% from three. The Timberwolves themselves shot 46%, but 32% from beyond the arc. If you look at it from an efficiency standpoint, offensive rating for Denver, 113.9. It puts you in the 41st percentile. Minnesota, 104 points per 100 possessions. That's in the 22nd percentile. Not a particularly fast game, flow just around 100 possessions. It was a somewhat disjointed affair. But the big one is going to be 16 trips to the free throw line for Jamal Murray. And in general, a 93rd percentile rate for the free throw rate for Denver. That is going to be something that will matter in a game like that. It's also the health of Edwards, though, and whether or not he is going to be able to play to his level. He's going to play. He was at shoot-around earlier today. For those who weren't with us earlier, that has been reported. We know he's going to be out there despite the questionable tag. The question is just how effective will he be, and how effective will he be as a facilitator, as getting others involved. One of the things that was brought up was the lack of scoring from one Jane McDaniels, 6 of 14 from the floor. He was 0 of 4 from three-point range. This was brought up in the press to Edwards after the game. Here's what he had to say about Daniels and getting him involved.
He's bringing the ball up the court, so I'm bringing the ball up the court. I got to find a way to get him the ball, initiate, and get him the ball within the play. And I think Finchie does a great job of trying to call his number, but I got to do it without Finchie calling his number a lot more because he's really talented. And he didn't get number 14 shots tonight. We need him to shoot more on the 18 to 20 shots tonight. So, yeah, that's on us.
Yeah, you got to be able to more involved here as well, and making sure that you have some sort of other outlet offensively for the Minnesota Timberwolves outside of what we're talking about here. Dante DiVincenzo had a pretty good game. He was 4-7 from beyond the arc. Randall was somewhat quiet in his effectiveness, 16.7 rebounds, 7 of 16. But it makes for an odd game to handicap as you move forward to game 2, only because of the status of what Edwards is going to be, and we don't know exactly how healthy he is. Opener for game 1 was 5.5 in favor of Denver, close 6.5. Ultimately, Denver covers. Game goes under the total. Now we have here a slight adjustment where market today is at that point. We're up to 7 with a total of 232. I think part of that is the questionable tag for one Anthony Edwards, but I would expect that he's going to be out there. So when he's officially active, will we see this drop? Will we see it get back to 6.5? I lean a little bit here toward Minnesota only because of the adjustment based off one result and the fact that Anthony Edwards is questionable. You just don't really know how effective these guys are going to be when you're talking about health. As I always say, you don't have the Mortal Kombat bar floating above your head for every single one of these dudes. But the other part of this, too, we should note is the fact that Denver, with how bad they shot from beyond the arc, still ended up pulling away in that fourth quarter. It's not a great sign for Minnesota. And frankly, given what we saw from Anthony Edwards, just gauging him in terms of health, explosiveness, things like that, and whether or not Denver could pull away without shooting a bunch of threes, not really boding well for the over 5.5 games in this series. Maybe Denver can get this done. I mean, I would like it. They're going to have a tough set next against the San Antonio Spurs, one would think. And so if that is the case, you'd like a short series. But over 5.5 games after game 1, nothing is lost. But still, something worth tracking is Edwards, his health, and what this means. But lean towards 7.5 tonight only because of that adjustment based off nothing but the fact that he is questionable in the game that I am pretty confident he is going to play in. Atlanta and New York, let's go here now. This one was a fun game, odd game at that, too. You saw Jalen Brunson go insane in the first quarter, then completely disappear as the game went along. I think there's a couple of things you have to ask here, though. The main one is, will Atlanta's offensive production improve in this game despite its limitations, as we have discussed ad nauseum in previewing the series? A lack of a true shot creator, especially in the backcourt. Game 1, 105.2 offensive rating in a non-garbage time, a half-court rating of 91.2 in the game against New York in Game 1 on Saturday. For some context, Atlanta's half-court offensive rating in Game 1 would have ranked dead last by a mile, 91.2. The Nets were last in the regular season at 91.6. Bench production was a little bit of an edge in favor of New York, at least in terms of total output, 20 points to 13. But the real thing is, 2. First off, are you going to be able to contain Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, specifically Towns? If you go back to the regular season, in 3 games, Towns has terrorized the Hawks. They have no real answer for what he provides offensively and on the glass. 25 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. He was 6 of 13 from the floor, 3 of 4 from three-point range. As you mentioned, Brunson with a strong stat line in general, but still disappeared as the game went along. 28 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 9 of 22 shooting. He also went 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. And the other is how this game is going to be called as you move forward. Knicks had a really big advantage when it came to officiating the foul calls. A 31.1 free throw rate. They took 30 free throw attempts. Atlanta, a 13.8 free throw rate and 19 free throw attempts. And let's put it simply, the Knicks made 6 more free throws than the Hawks had attempted. So how this is called is really going to matter for New York as well. But I think you can make the case potentially for this game to go over the total. Unlike some of the games that we're talking about here, we haven't really seen a big adjustment. New York closed as a 6.5-point favorite with a total of 217.5 on Saturday. The number right now is a 6.5-point spread in favor of New York with a total of 217.5 or 218.5, depending on where you look. Circa and other books on the high side here are 218.5, and they just have a flat 6 at this point. You could just play the zigzag if you wanted. I think given the larger sample size of recent history, it would tell you that you don't want to just blindly play a trend and have some reason to back that up. And you do wonder with Atlanta, as has been pointed out by a lot of smart folks when you look at the analysis of the film from Game 1, is, I brought up the bench, what you do with a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. You saw the downside of Kuminga in that game against the Knicks. He was stopping the ball. The offense got stagnant. He wasn't particularly efficient as well. And so if that's going to start to play a role in this, as well as the Knicks' ability to hide guys like Karl-Anthony Towns on Dyson Daniels. Daniels, of course, was really a non-factor in that first game over the weekend. That's going to be a problem over the course of a best-of-7 that is going to rear its ugly head. Should also note, similar to what we talked about with Anthony Edwards, Onyeka Okongwu is questionable to play here today. He went through shoot-around. He's going to go. He's been playing through this questionable tag himself. 19 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, with 6 and 9 from the floor. But you really look at this. Look at the names coming off the bench for Atlanta. Jonathan Kuminga, Gabe Vincent, Mohamed Gay, and Zachary Rissache, who only got 2 minutes. There is not a ton of front court depth for the Atlanta Hawks. This is going to be a massive problem for them as this series continues to drag out, and I don't think it'll drag out for very long. Sports Calendar never stops. Sharp Plays covers it all. They've been winning for 15 straight years, all of it documented. Logs posted publicly at sharpplays.com. It's the kind of transparency that is rare in this industry. Respected, watched, feared. Start winning with them at sharpplays.com.